Ali Khamenei was born on April 19, 1939 in Mashhad, a city in northeastern Iran and one of the holiest sites in Shia Islam, home to the shrine of Imam Reza, visited by millions of pilgrims each year. He was the second of 8 children born to a clerical family of Azerbaijani descent. His father was a religious scholar of modest means. Khamenei recalled in his official biography that the family sometimes had nothing for supper but bread and raisins. He became a cleric at the age of 11, began formal seminary training in Mashhad, studied briefly at the seminaries in Najaf in Iraq, and then moved to Qom, the center of Iranian Shia scholarship, in 1958. Where he became a direct student of Ruhollah Khomeini, the man who would later lead the Iranian Revolution and become the Islamic Republic's founding supreme leader. That relationship with Khomeini defined everything that followed. In the early 1960s, as Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi launched his Western-oriented modernization program, a set of reforms Khomeini publicly condemned, Khamenei became an active organizer of resistance. He distributed anti-regime literature, organized protests, and recruited supporters. The Shah's secret police, Savak, arrested him 6 times between 1963 and 1979. According to his official biography, he was tortured in detention. He was exiled for 3 years. He endured all of it without breaking with Khomeini or abandoning the revolutionary cause. By the time the Shah's government collapsed in 1979 and Khomeini returned from exile in Paris to declare the Islamic Republic, Khamenei was already a trusted member of the inner circle, not a peripheral figure, but a man who had been tested and proven over nearly 2 decades of active resistance. After the revolution, he moved rapidly through the new state's power structure. He was appointed Deputy Defense Minister. He became Tehran's Friday prayer leader, a politically significant platform that gave him direct access to the capital's public. He was elected to parliament. He co-founded the Islamic Republican Party. He was appointed as Khomeini's personal representative on the Supreme Defense Council during the war with Iraq. In 1981, after President Mohammad Ali Rajai was assassinated in a bombing, Khamenei was elected president of Iran. He served 2 consecutive terms, from 1981 to 1989, through the bloodiest years of the Iran-Iraq War, during which hundreds of thousands of Iranians were killed. It was during this period that he built his closest relationships with the commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, relationships that would later become the foundation of his consolidation of absolute power. He also nearly died during this period. In 1981, a bomb hidden inside a tape recorder exploded while he was delivering a speech at a mosque. The explosion permanently paralyzed his right arm, which he kept tucked against his body for the rest of his life. He survived the assassination attempt, but carried its physical mark for 45 years until the day he was killed. Khamenei was not supposed to become supreme leader. When Ruhollah Khomeini died on June 3, 1989, the Assembly of Experts convened immediately to choose a successor. Khamenei was a mid-ranking cleric who had not attained the rank of Grand Ayatollah, which the Constitution required for the position of supreme leader. He openly expressed reservations about his own religious qualifications during the deliberations. His ascension was orchestrated primarily by his chief political ally, Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, who calculated that Khamenei would be manageable and controllable, a placeholder rather than a dominant figure. The Constitution was amended to remove the religious qualification requirement. Khamenei was confirmed as supreme leader on June 4, 1989, the day after Khomeini's death. Every person who underestimated him would spend the next 36 years watching that calculation prove spectacularly wrong. What Khamenei built over those 36 years was one of the most consolidated single-person power structures in modern political history. The supreme leader in Iran's constitution is not a ceremonial head of state. He is commander-in-chief of all armed forces. He appoints the heads of the judiciary, the state broadcaster, and the commanders of the IRGC. He has final authority over foreign policy, nuclear policy, and war and peace decisions. Every president of the Islamic Republic, reformist or hardliner, operated within boundaries Khamenei set and enforced. He dismissed or sidelined every one of them when they stepped outside those boundaries. Mohammad Khatami's reform movement was neutralized. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, despite being ideologically aligned with Khamenei, fell out of favor by his second term. Hassan Rouhani's nuclear diplomacy and the 2015 deal with the West moved forward only because Khamenei permitted it, and was subsequently abandoned partly because Khamenei allowed it to collapse. Every president left office discredited. Khamenei remained untouched. He never gave an interview to any media organization, domestic or foreign. During his entire 36 years as supreme leader, he made no official trips abroad. He operated in deliberate seclusion, projecting authority through religious rulings, occasional speeches, and the vast institutional architecture of the state he controlled. Critics described him as beyond accountability. His supporters described him as the guardian of the revolution. Both descriptions were accurate. Under his leadership, Iran became the world's most prominent state sponsor of terrorism, according to successive US State Department designations. He built the IRGC from a revolutionary military force into the dominant economic, military, and intelligence power in Iran. A state within a state that controlled vast sectors of the Iranian economy through affiliated companies and foundations, while simultaneously running Iran's proxy network across the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria, all were funded, trained, and directed under Khamenei's strategic oversight through a doctrine he called the axis of resistance. The stated purpose of that axis was to surround and pressure Israel from multiple directions simultaneously, using non-state actors as deniable military instruments. The nuclear program was the most consequential dimension of his legacy. Khamenei consistently maintained publicly that Iran's nuclear program was for civilian purposes and issued a religious ruling, a fatwa, declaring that the production of nuclear weapons was forbidden under Islamic law. Western intelligence agencies and the IAEA consistently assessed that Iran was developing nuclear capabilities that had no civilian justification, enriching uranium to levels approaching weapons grade, developing delivery systems, and building centrifuge infrastructure far beyond what any civilian energy program required. The gap between Khamenei's public position and the physical evidence of Iran's nuclear activities was never satisfactory. Resolved, and it became the defining axis of confrontation between Iran and the West for 2 decades. He survived the 2009 Green Movement, the largest protest wave Iran had seen since the revolution, triggered by a disputed presidential election, by ordering a violent crackdown that put the opposition leadership under house arrest for years. He survived the 2019 protests against fuel price rises that killed hundreds. He survived the 2022 protests that erupted following the death in police custody of 22-year-old Mossad Unit, detained by the morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly, protests that spread to dozens of cities and were suppressed with lethal force, killing hundreds more. And in January 2026, just weeks before the US and Israeli strikes began, his security forces conducted what observers described as the most brutal suppression of unrest since the revolution's early years, killing thousands of protesters in the largest uprising the Islamic Republic had faced. Trump, watching those protests, posted publicly that help was on the way. 6 weeks later it arrived. His relationship with Israel was one of the defining confrontations of the modern Middle East. Khamenei called for Israel's destruction repeatedly and openly over 36 years. He denied the Holocaust publicly on multiple occasions. He provided Hezbollah with the weapons, funding, and strategic direction that made it the most militarily capable non-state actor in history. He authorized and oversaw Iran's direct missile and drone strikes on Israeli territory in April and October 2024, the first time Iran had ever directly attacked Israel from Iranian soil. Those strikes were Iran's response to Israeli operations against Iranian interests. Each escalation tightened the coil of direct confrontation between two countries that had for decades fought through proxies and preferred to keep their conflict at arm's length. The 12-day war in June 2025 was the first time Israel and Iran fought each other directly in an open military exchange. Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities and missile infrastructure. The US joined that strike. Iran retaliated. A ceasefire was negotiated. Khamenei survived that war by going underground, cutting all communications and making himself invisible to Israeli intelligence. Israeli Defense Minister Katz later confirmed publicly that Israel had not been able to target Khamenei during the June 2025 conflict because he sheltered in hardened bunkers and generated no intelligence signature. That decision to shelter during the June 2025 war may have given Khamenei a false sense of operational invulnerability, or it may be that there was simply no diplomatic or strategic path that was going to delay what the US and Israel had decided to do. On the Friday before February 28th, Oman announced that Iran had agreed in principle to never stockpile enriched uranium sufficient for a nuclear weapon, the core demand the US had been making for years. Trump said he was not thrilled with the talks. 48 hours later, the authorization message left Air Force One at 3:38 p.m. Eastern Time. Operation Epic Fury is approved. No aborts. Good luck. Saturday morning, February 28th, 2026, 9:40 a.m. in Tehran. Khamenei was at his compound near Pasteur Street for a senior leadership meeting. He was 86 years old with a paralyzed right arm, a lifetime of surviving assassination attempts, 6 arrests, 3 years of exile, a bomb, and 4 decades of being the most hunted man in the Middle East. 30 Sparrow missiles reached the compound simultaneously. Israel's Unit 8200 and Mossad had been watching the compound through Tehran's own traffic camera network for years. The cellular towers near Pasteur Street were disrupted moments before impact so that no warning call could go through. The missiles did not miss. Iran's state broadcaster confirmed his death at 2 a.m. on March 1st. Trump confirmed it on social media minutes later. The man who had ruled Iran for 36 years, outlasted 8 US presidents, survived multiple assassination attempts, built the most sophisticated regional proxy network in the world, driven Iran's nuclear program to the threshold of weapons capability, and made himself the central figure in the most consequential geopolitical confrontation of the early 21st century, was dead at 86, killed by the precise convergence of 25 years of Israeli intelligence work, American satellite and human source tracking, and a Saturday morning meeting that the wrong people found out about. His death did not end the Islamic Republic. The IRGC continued launching missiles within hours. His son, Mossad Khamenei, has been discussed as a possible successor, though no formal succession has been confirmed. The 3-member Constitutional Emergency Council governing Iran has no real authority over the IRGC. The missiles are still flying, the war is still ongoing, but the man who set the doctrine, held the threads, made the final calls, and defined what the Islamic Republic was for over a third of a century is gone. What replaces him, if anything coherent replaces him, will determine not just Iran's future, but the shape of the entire Middle East for the generation that follows.